Welcome back to the Lion's Den. Today we speak with Scot Tatelman. He and his wife, Jacqueline, founded a company called State Bags, and they produce really, really high quality backpacks, duffel bags, suitcases, really cool company. But what makes them extremely unique is that from the beginning, from their inception, they were extremely focused not just on production and profitability, but equally on how to give back and what their charitable giving strategy would be and their plan would be. And we get into a lot of that conversation with Scot because he himself was the quote unquote give back guy of the partnership. And so it's his role to exclusively think about that stuff. And so we talk a lot about, the types of charitable giving that they've done, which is amazing. I mean, you have to listen to this. It's some super high quality partnerships that they formed. But we also get into the playbook of how to go about doing charitable giving at your organization. And it's actually a lot simpler than you think. So highly encourage everybody to give this a listen and start to implement some of the things that Scot talks about.
Scot, welcome to the Lion's Den.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no doubt. I was on your website actually right before this, the State Bags website. And I had never been on there before. I was seriously tempted to buy some bags. I mean, I saw rucksacks on there. I'm like in the market for one of those. And you got like the bags with the lightning bolts on them. I was like, damn, that'd be kind of nice to have too. Are you at all involved in the creative process of the bag design?
Well, first of all, get ready for some major retargeting ads that we're going to hit you with now that you've hit our website. They're all coming. They're on their way. They're in the queue. Yeah, I mean, I have to give literally all the credit to my wife and her design team, who are just an incredibly talented group of young professionals that just have such a way of seeing our product and seeing what's coming and the trends and everything else. And we actually just yesterday went through their first iteration of Back to School 25, and it's not even September yet. And it is mind blowing. And every year, I'll say to them, like, I don't know how you guys do this. Like, you reinvent and you recreate and find ways to take a dinosaur product like a backpack and just like make it so unbelievably creative, and just the wow factor with the lightning bolts. I mean, what's coming is nuts. And what's here right now for back to school is equally crazy. So to answer your question, it is 99% Jacqueline and her team of designers and 1% me, where she like shows me a sketch or a CAD or an actual sample, and I'll be like, I think you need to tone down the blue. And she'll be like, got it. And she just walks out of the room. And I'm like, all right. And then so when a bag does really well and I had that piece of feedback, I'll be like, yeah, that's mine.
Nice. She toned down the blue. That was my idea.
Yeah, that's my bag. That's my design.
And the back to school thing, it is super cool. Yeah, I was on there. There were like the backpacks with like basketballs and the ones with like flowers like popping off of the bag. I mean, if you have one of those bags, you are the coolest kid in school. Like that's how that works.
I mean, that's the goal, right? Like, we just went to school with these, like, back then we were calling them knapsacks, which has become like nails on the chalkboard for me, that word. But just like basic bags. You didn't think about like, getting super stylish and crazy with them, and, like a flex walking to school with like, a certain style on day one. And that's what we want them to feel is, and also our giveaway bags, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, are like super fun, and the colors like pop so much. And so when we do our bag drop events, which we did a couple weeks ago in LA, like these kids can't wait to put their stuff from their existing backpacks into their bright, new, colorful, school-ready ones, just like shoving their stuff in there. And because it's like they have a lot of pride in the fact that like their bags look cool and they do the job.
Yeah.
And we like to think that across everyone who wears them, not just the people buying them, but the kids that are, that we're donating to, and they feel just as good and cool about the bags that they've been getting.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's a confidence builder in
yeah.
in school, which can be a place where there's a lot of low self-esteem at times. So I think that's awesome. So, you mentioned the bag giveaways and stuff like that. I definitely want to loop around and end up there in this conversation. But first I wanted to ask, obviously you and your wife run this super successful bag company, yet you are known as an anti-entrepreneur. What does that mean?
Well, I guess I don't know, it sounds weird, but I'm really not that interested in like becoming this mega business that just sells stuff. That was never exciting to me. What has always been exciting and has moved me emotionally and has driven me for, all these years is being a business that's much more than just making money, or about much more than just making money. And that's kind of what I always like when I talk to kids, in classrooms or, at our bag drop events or we're at the camp that I run, like, I always say, like, you can actually be an entrepreneur in ways that may be different than what you know. So it's like all we know is like these tech billionaires who are, rocketing off into space and driving $1 zillion cars and, living in these ridiculous homes and yachts and all this stuff. But like, there's actually a way to do really good stuff on the business side while doing better stuff for the world. And that's kind of where I have tried to go is, I don't know if it's anti-entrepreneur, but just really like a thoughtful entrepreneur in that, like, if we can do really well selling the products that we work so hard to design and market and all that stuff, then for me, that means like, it's not money that's being pocketed into our pockets, but it's like, that's money that I can then distribute to communities, kids and families that are constantly feeling overlooked and that they're not given the love that they deserve. And, as a for-profit company, I think there's a lot of companies that are doing great stuff, on the philanthropic charitable front, but there's a lot of companies that are just checking boxes. And like, I'm not interested in that. I like to really be thoughtful. I like to listen to the communities and the organizations and executive directors, principals, schools that we work with, and like just blow them away with how we have just gone above and beyond to support their kids in ways that no one else has thought of, just because we listen and just because we're not interested in one thing. And that's just like, revenue. It's like, yeah, like revenue helps us do good stuff in communities. And so I guess if that makes me an anti-entrepreneur, I'll take it. But, I just kind of, I don't know. I've always strived to be kind of multifaceted in how we look at a business and how it's become successful. Success to me doesn't mean just like, selling for hundreds of millions of dollars. It's like, it's donating hundreds of thousands of backpacks and like supporting communities and like getting their message out there and causes that are just constantly feeling like nobody's turning to them.
Yeah. It does remind me of certain courses in business school, let's say, where you start talking about, your shareholders, but also all of your stakeholders in your business, and your employees are stakeholders, your customers are stakeholders, the community in which you operate is a stakeholder. And there's a lot of like talk about that, but then you're right. Nobody really embodies that like ethos in their business. It really ends up just being shareholders primarily, customers and employees secondarily. The community never really factors into it. So I think that's awesome what you guys are doing. And your title is actually not CEO or COO or anything like that. It's give back guy. Is that right?
Yeah, my wife really it's starting to irk her that I still am leaning on this title, but I love it. She tried to push me to chief giving officer, and I was like, I don't know, that just doesn't fit me. I'm not an officer of anything. I'm a guy who gives a lot, and I like to give back and I like to be thoughtful about it. And so, but what you were saying before about like stakeholders and investors and interested partners and stuff, like, it's safe to say that there's been countless people out there who have been like, you guys are really hurting, you're shooting yourselves in the foot with all the giving efforts that you do. And from the minute one, we were like, that's who we are. Like, we started this company because we ran a nonprofit summer camp for 14 years for kids from New York City's most underfunded neighborhoods. And we built relationships with kids and families in those neighborhoods that, like, you know, we just felt like so connected to and had such an obligation to, that like when we started State, we made a promise. And, you know, we're not the type of people who are not going to follow through on that. And that's my wife included. And so, yeah, I mean, our giving efforts are no joke. Like, we go really big, and we always have. Even before we had any sales, we were just like committed to figuring it out. And I think the authenticity of it all has led to really good moments and partnerships, and people kind of investing in us, saying like, I like what these guys are doing because it's real. There's a realness to it. And, you know, these days realness comes at a premium. You don't really know what's real sometimes with social media and everything these days. So we take a lot of pride in that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know, the origin of your company, State Bags, I think is fairly well documented. You mentioned Camp Power, the nonprofit camp that you guys put on in New York City to help underfunded neighborhoods. And from what I read, while you were running that camp, you noticed, hey, there's a lot of kids showing up to this camp with their stuff in trash bags, grocery bags, whatever bag they could get their hands on. And that was sort of the impetus for State Bags, as I understand it. Was it like, how easy was it going from, hey, there's a need here for bags, to let's create a company that like manufactures bags? I mean, how did that transition actually end up happening?
I mean, we were like deep into having our first child. So like, my wife was pregnant with our daughter, who's now 12. And, you know, it actually happened. We started seeing this happening at Camp Power, where kids were showing up with their stuff in trash bags. But then we did this annual weekend trip to either Boston or Philadelphia, where our scholarship award winners at Camp Power would come, and we would do college tours, and we would do sightseeing stuff, and we would just like tour a city like Boston or Philly and get kids on the train, and, you know, like get them out of their neighborhoods. And so there was a moment when one of the kids, they were like rushing to get to the train because we were obviously late, because that's how we roll. And she had all of her stuff in a Dwayne Reed bag for the weekend, and like rushing, and all of a sudden the stuff just like sprayed all over the sidewalk. And that was her luggage for the weekend, was like a Dwayne Reed ripped up, tattered shopping bag. And that night, Jacqueline and I, at the time we were living in Boston before we moved back to Brooklyn again. And we just were like sitting together, and we were like, there's got to be a way to build a for-profit brand that could support the kids that we serve and the neighborhoods that we work in. And it kind of turned into like, let's do something like Tom's, like maybe it's a 1-for-1, but let's like do it with different product, but like give the spirit of Camp Power. So like, when we give, it wouldn't just be like shipping boxes across the country to schools, but like putting on events that like motivate and inspire and bring in role model figures and celebrities and DJs and all this stuff. And so we started putting these ideas together. And for me, I was like, I know what we can do on the giving side. Like, I know, but the product was like, I don't know how to make product. Like, I don't know. And my wife is like crazy talented, deep background in fashion, literally was like walking around her mom's clothing boutique in like diapers and high heels, like in New York. So she knows so much. And we met with this consulting company to kind of throw out the idea and help us. And they turned and they were like, well, listen, if you want to be a give back company, you have to make really nice stuff, because it has to be priced at a point that you can then give away, so that you're not just losing money on all the charitable stuff. And they were like, which means it needs to look really good. It means that she needs to be involved. And both of us were like, no. She's not. She's raising a kid. Like, we're like, she's birthing a child. Like, we're not doing this. So, and they were like, no, it needs to be the two of you. And that was never the intention. We never meant to do this together. This is supposed to be like Scott's thing. And here I am, August 29th, 2024, and my wife is CEO, creative director, chief everything for the company, and I'm the give back guy. So it's kind of crazy how things have evolved, because to answer your question in a very long way is like, she knew how to kind of create product. She knew and worked with a lot of helpful people to get it produced in the right way, quality, all that stuff. And then all the business stuff is like her brain. I'm not like a business brain. I'm just not. And it took a long time to kind of swallow that pride and realize that. But she has the special talent of being unbelievably creative and super smart business. So like, she's got the two brains, and it did not come easy in the first couple years. The product was a mess. Our marketing was wrong. Everything was off, except the giving stuff was always on point. We are always getting really great feedback from schools and stuff, and organizations. So the business has taken a long time, but we're finally in a really good place. And that's, again, in large part to Jacqueline.
Yeah. Wow. That's super cool. And I want to kind of dig in here a little bit, because, I'm fascinated by this approach, especially in the early days of starting the business. Like, I understand financially how it could work now, because you guys have significant volume, right? And so volume of a premium product has healthy margins, and you can give. When I start a business, or when I even think about starting a business, I start off just in Excel, and I'm like modeling out the financials. What can the price be? What are my profit margins going to be? How many of these can I sell? Who am I going to need in order to sell that many? And what am I going to have to pay those people? It's like, I model the whole thing out, and it's always tough in the first couple years financially. And maybe a few years in, you get to a place where it's like, okay, now we can start giving back, because we have the cash flow to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm so curious, when you say in the early days, what was going well was the giving part. So how were you affording the giving part in the early days?
We weren't. I mean, I say that in terms of like execution, like the feedback and the smiles and the love we were getting in the communities from kids and teachers, executive directors and stuff, were like, oh my God, this is incredible. I can't believe this. And we were like hemorrhaging money, and it was like, it was not financially viable, and we had to make a lot of adjustments, which we did, which ended up, making us a lot healthier and stuff. But like, I think it speaks to what I was saying before, of just like, we just didn't want to be this like kind of one trick pony that like had product and was a 1-for-1 and whatever. Like, to us, that just didn't speak to who we were, and wasn't who we wanted to be as a company. So yeah, we had to make some major changes, and so that we could continue doing what we were doing on the giving side, that meant making like major shifts to like, we initially launched the company, and like our website was like very much like led with like the charitable stuff, the messaging and the imagery and stuff like that, which we were and are so proud of. But we quickly learned that like, if your product isn't there and it doesn't look good, it's not priced right, it doesn't perform well, like, nobody gives. Can I swear on this?
Sure.
Nope. All right. Nobody cares about, your charitable stuff, because like, they're buying something and it doesn't look good and it doesn't feel good, and it's not valued at what you said it was. So we had to kind of realign a lot of our messaging and positioning on our website. So instead of it being like the first thing you see, we had to kind of like take a note from Warby Parker, which is like, you dig a little bit and you start to see, oh wow, this company's also got a great charitable mission. So that changed. We were we were giving the same bags we were selling at the beginning, which was just like, I mean, you mentioned margin, like that was
Yeah.
a killer. But we were just so like such bleeding hearts that we just were like, this is what we're doing. And eventually, as business owners, we were kind of told, like, well, that's nice. If you want to survive, you should probably make some changes. So we had to do that. We changed our mission. So instead of being a one for one company, we're now for every state bag sold, we support American kids, families, and communities in need, but in the ways they need it most. So that provides flexibility for us so that if I speak to a school and they're like, we actually don't need bags, but what we do need is for someone to shed light on, the police brutality going on in the neighborhoods, or we're in Flint, Michigan, and our water is still poisoned. And so we could like use our voice and our what do we tell the kids platform to shed light. So I guess like there was a lot of things that kind of had to happen so that we could continue giving, and to be smart about it from a business standpoint. And that took time too, but we got there.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and we talked about this a little bit last time we chatted. With this business model, you give up some cash flow in the short term, and therefore you give up some growth prospects in the short term because you could be using that cash to reinvest into marketing, sales, growth, whatever. But with this business model, it actually might be a better strategy for long-term growth to be giving things away like this, because there's a possibility of generating really, really positive publicity, which could result in outsized growth that you couldn't have generated in any other way. Did you experience that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Like when we got a call from Beyonce's team saying, we want to do something big with you guys. And we were like 2 years in, not even. And we were like, oh my God, like, why us? And they were like, because we see that this is real and genuine. And then that ended up turning into Urban Outfitters calling us and us selling there. And then that turned into us partnering with, President Obama and Rock Nation and doing something at the White House. And it's interesting because all of our biggest, well, that's changing a little bit recently, but in the early days, all of our biggest like press moments and kind of things that got our name out there and even like brand building stuff was like tied to the charitable initiatives. So like the Beyonce thing was a charitable initiative. Chance the Rapper, charitable initiative. President Obama and Rock Nation, same thing. The Honest Company with Jessica Alba, like we did a big bag drop in Southern California with her. And Star Wars and all this stuff was kind of like people kind of drew to us because of what we were doing on the giving side, which for me was such an honor. It was so cool. But the truth is like, as great as those moments were, it just like, I don't know. I've kind of learned over the years, like more noise means like more, like less impact sometimes, not to like downplay all of those partnerships because they were actually incredible and we did some really special stuff. But I've just grown to like kind of doing what we do like quietly and like intimate, like finding like pockets of need and like really being thoughtful. Like our virtual tutoring initiative during COVID, I think was still one of the best things we've ever done. We did something called the Travel Academy last year and the year before where we put kids on a plane for the first time, sent kids from Brooklyn to California for a week-long trip, and then kids from California to Hawaii getting on a plane for the first time. Like, and it was just 8 and 10 kids. Like, so, sometimes when you make big partnerships, the goals are like, we need thousands of kids and, take over a whole neighborhood and block party. And it's like, okay, we could do that. Or we could just like, do something very like specific that's going to change a few lives that are then going to turn into, who knows, the next Barack Obama, the next Kamala Harris, whatever. So.
And that actually sounds really doable for many companies. Like paying for a small group of kids to fly somewhere and have like the trip of a lifetime. I mean, that does not seem like a crazy charitable, cash suck that a company would have to incur, right?
Yeah, I mean, and to credit, like the first trip we did, it was just us. Like we sponsored and paid for the whole thing. I was there every step of the way along the trip. I planned the trip, I executed the trip, I was there. But Alaska Airlines reached out to us and they were like, "We see what you're doing with this travel academy with these kids from Brooklyn. Can we partner with you on the next one?" And I was like, "Okay." And so that's when that kind of turned into something bigger. And, Alaska flew from San Francisco to Hawaii. So we took a bunch of kids from Oakland, West Oakland Middle School. Shout out to my crew there. And we went to Hawaii. And again, I was with them. We built the itinerary. We made it like not just sightseeing stuff, but like really like soul character building stuff. And it was beautiful. So to your point, yeah, like it's not so hard sometimes. And companies sometimes look at it as this daunting endeavor. Like, oh, like how are we going to give? It needs to be so big and it needs to make such a splash in the press. And it's like, I don't know. Sometimes like these kids, I could text them right now and be like, "Was Hawaii the best experience of your life?" And they would be like, "What? Yes, of course." And like mission accomplished, and now they all want to travel and they all want to see the world and see their neighborhood or see neighborhoods outside of their own and become marine biologists because they went to an aquarium in Maui. Like, it's like, I love bringing that stuff and, opening eyes.
Man, that's so cool. And it's also, as I'm kind of reflecting on it, it's like a lot of what entrepreneurs hear is like, just start. Like when it comes to their business, it's like, don't think too much, just start, just get going.
Yeah.
And the path will kind of like unveil itself as long as you just are genuine and hardworking in what you're doing. And it sounds like it's the same thing here. It's like if you are thinking like, oh, we would love to do charitable giving, but it's too daunting. What do we do? It's like just find something small, just start, do one thing, and you'll learn from it. And people may realize what you're doing, and then they want to contribute, which then increases the scope of what you can do on the next one. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting from you? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I've started consulting with companies and helping them with their giving efforts. And I actually just had a call yesterday with this company that's just starting up. And I always tell them like the first thing that I do in my process when I start working with companies is like, I'll just have like a one-on-one with whoever is leading the company or whoever's, kind of making decisions. And I'll ask questions like, what makes you cry? Like what's something on, you see it on TV, you hear a story, podcast, whatever. And you just, all of a sudden it like hits you and you're emotional and you don't even know why. Like what is that for you? And we'll dive into it a little bit, because if you can be emotional about something like personally, and you can tie it to what your company that you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears in, like, I don't know, that's when the genuinity starts to really come through. And that's when you start feeling like we're not just checking boxes. We're actually like really thinking about impact because I'm emotionally invested in it. And that's why I think we've just been really successful with states stuff, because like when I'm at one of these initiatives that, I obviously put them all together, but like when I see the things that happen, I get choked up. And it's like, I there's something different about it, because like the specific things that we do move me. And like, if you can tie it to your company, it's like a double whammy, So I think you have to really tap into like what gets you emotional as the leader of a company, So that's kind of where I go.
And that's how you can keep it authentic, because, as we're going through this conversation, when we're talking about the part of, charitable giving can get you publicity that then results in even more business growth, a part of me is thinking like, oh, okay, I need to do some charitable giving so I can make even more money. And it's like, well, no, now I'm missing the point. Now I'm going in the wrong direction. So I think maybe what you just laid out is the way to avoid that. And probably if a business were to go about it in the way I just described, where it's like, let me give back so I can make more, you're probably not going to be as successful that way, because probably the giving that you do is not going to come across as authentic as it would need to be in order to get attention and
Yeah.
publicity. Okay.
So I love this story. Somebody told me this a long time ago, and I think about it constantly, where this big like bank had their like giving day, right? And like, these like big corporate days where they go into a neighborhood or school, and like hundreds of employees show up at some school in like, the Bronx or whatever. And they show up and they're like painting murals, and they're planting trees and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, they have like an assembly where the principal introduces like the CEO of the company or the leader of the day or whatever. And there's kind of like a lackluster like applause from the students and the teachers. And afterwards, the CEO or whoever goes up to the principal and is like, "Hey, that kind of felt like a little bit like weak, like we spent all day here painting murals, planting trees, all this stuff." And the principal was like, "Honestly, like, can I be candid with you? Like, because we don't need trees and we don't need murals. We need books. Our teachers are, dipping into their own pockets to pay for their own resources for their classrooms. But nobody asked us, because you just think that we are a high need population and a high need community. So you make assumptions and you show up for one day and you think that you've changed all these kids' lives. Yes, the school is more colorful. Yes, there'll be more shade. Awesome. But like, if you asked me what we really need, I would tell you exactly what that is. So I always like begin everything that I do without making any assumptions, and by having the conversations, talking to the people in the trenches, working every single day, doing the work, who can tell me like, okay, honestly, here's what we're really lacking and we're up against right now. And I could be like, okay. And then I could kind of put together a plan, devise it, come back to them and say like, what do you think of this? And then they'll be like, holy shit, like, yes, this is what we need. And then as a for-profit company, to listen and then deliver and then some, that's when like my biggest moments of pride happen, when we leave a school or an organization and they're like blown away that I took the time to listen and then like just went above and beyond what was even a thought. And so I think that's happening a lot, is assumptions are being made because like, you hear about these communities that are struggling, and they are, but I don't know if people are taking enough time to actually listen to what they're up against. And I know a lot of people don't have the time to do that and to have those conversations, but they're really important and they drive everything that I do.
Well, these companies that aren't doing that, they need a give back guy on their executive team.
Sure. They might need to change the title, but sure.
Is that kind of what like I guess we'll call it a month in the life looks like for you as a give back guy? It's kind of like pick the areas that move you, go listen to the people that are in those places, areas, schools, whatever, and then creatively with your team try to come up with, okay, how can we best give them exactly what they need? Is that your job basically?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm in a fortunate position where like, I had a camp on the East Coast for 14 years, and I'm so connected and in touch with the families and the kids who I just kind of like have ideas brewing all the time. So like, I know that a lot of people in the corporate world like don't have those connections. And so this summer I started a new nonprofit camp for kids from Oakland and Marin City. And so like, I'm kind of tapped into a lot of the neighborhoods that we typically do serve. So I have kind of a leg up in that sense that like, I don't need to like, I have thoughts constantly circling my head because I'm like just having conversations a lot. But yes, I think that that's a good start. And I think, yeah, like I said, tapping into what really drives you and your company emotionally and your leadership team, and then like reaching out to the organizations that are kind of doing that work. And then going from there. Like, I honestly, I think a lot of times like showing up, not scheduling a phone call or a Zoom, but literally like driving to their site, driving through the neighborhood, taking the time to just like walk around their facility, meet the team. Like, to me, that goes a long way. And I think that what I've heard a lot is like, nobody ever comes here. And I'm like, what? Like, so how can you work somewhere where you just like have this connection to? So it's like, sometimes it's little things, but you know, you have to kind of guide a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. Tell me about the, I was reading, what is the hashtag, what do we tell the kids initiative?
Oh man. So good question. At Camp Power, which was our nonprofit camp for kids from New York City, Bronx, and Brooklyn, we had these things called evening huddles. And every night after, because we were running all day, like kids are active, sports, tubing, ropes course, zip line, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, we would make sure to like reflect and talk. So those conversations could revolve around anything from like bullying to leadership to role modeling or whatever. And it just happened in 2016, I think it was. Really bad year and summer for police brutality. I think it was like the year of Trayvon. It was like there was a lot going on in Missouri. The stuff was happening there and just protests. It was scary. And so one of the conversations that started happening was like about Black Lives Matter. And one of the kids asked the group, like, why is there, what is Black Lives Matter? And all these kids are African American. They're all Black. And there is a social worker who is also Black, who is so good. I put on every tough patient. He could handle anything. He's sitting there and he's listening to these Black kids saying, why does there need to be something called Black Lives Matter? Do we not matter? And he was literally this social worker. I'm sitting there watching and listening, stumped, does not know what to say. He's literally like, yeah, of course. And all the other kids are like, but why are there like hashtags and bumper stickers like Black, like I'm Black, do I matter? And I was like watching this happen and I'm like, oh my God, like nobody knows how to handle this situation because this is so complex for a child and an adult. And so I just kind of like thought about it a lot and watched the conversation unfold and, took part as best I could. And I just felt like this was something that, like, it was a phenomenon that needed to be shared. So that fall, we launched this What Do We Tell the Kids platform where we took on tough social issues and kind of profiled people in ways that could shed light. And that was it, just shed light about how tough it is for even professional educators and social workers to, explain something like the Black Lives Matter phrase or movement to kids in Black neighborhoods and how that all ties into their psyche and their confidence and their fear and everything. And so we launched that, and then it was a little scary as a for-profit company because, like, I mean, it didn't have the lightning bolt kind of like attention like it does now, but like it was early. Like this is way before like, George Floyd and everything else. And it started to kind of like people were interested. And then we launched another one about LGBTQ community and like harmful language and words like faggot and that's so gay and no homo and all this stuff. And I profiled all these high profile people in the LGBTQ community, the co-writer of Saturday Night Live, GQ magazine, like all this stuff and their experiences in the community. And then that kind of like started getting traction and interest. And then I did a video about the R word, the word retarded, and how I just find it to be so offensive and why is it still being used? And we just kept going. And then I did a big initiative in Chicago and made a short film. So essentially the whole platform was built around this conversation where nobody knew what to say to the kids. And then I started thinking about more and how the society and the environment was getting so complex where like there was so much fear in the air in 2016, specifically politically and everything. And I just felt like it was our duty to just kind of like use our microphone and our platform for more than just like selling stuff and for more than just like bag drops, like our, donation events. And it was definitely unique and it was definitely risky. And we lost a lot of Instagram followers and a lot of email subscribers. But again, we were like, what the hell are we doing this for? Like, we want to be on the right side of history or the wrong side of history. And so again, like another proud moment of us just like holding hands and being like, we got to do this. This is who we are.
And so is it still up and running? And it's like a resource where I guess parents especially, or educators or wherever, they can go to it and sort of get ideas of how to communicate these very complex things to younger people. Is that kind of the point of it now?
Honestly, I put out, I think like 6 initiatives. The last one we did was for Juneteenth in 2020. And it was all these like really hard hitting conversations about like what Juneteenth means to people and slavery and stuff like that. And we put out like 33 like audio episodes and we called it Words for White Americans. And it was, I think, incredible. And I'm very proud of it. But it was like, it just got like really like mean. Like people were writing to us and like, I can take that, like, whatever, you believe what you want to believe. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. But it just like the rhetoric and everything else just started feeling like, I don't know if this is like it just started getting like a little bit like intense. And I also was just, seeing other companies like starting to do not similar stuff, but just like some kind of stuff. And I was like, you know what, we've been doing this a long time. And I think I'm just going to shelf it for now because the world is feeling like a little scary. And I think we put out enough stuff for a bunch of different communities that people could look at and go back to. It's timeless. And I'm going to pause because I'm going to let all these other companies pretend like they're like doing all this great work. And like, I'll sit back and let, whatever. So it's out there. You can see it, but I'm not really doing it as of now.
Gotcha.
Pause. I'm focusing on other like initiatives that I think are more impactful at the moment.
Okay. Well, I want to start wrapping things up, but maybe you can give me a taste of one of those initiatives that you're kind of excited about that you've got cooking coming down the pike.
Yeah. I mean, so what's incredible is that, Camp Power was not funded like by state. It wasn't sponsored by state ever. We obviously like equipped the whole camp with bags and I was the camp director and Jacqueline was there every step of the way. But Camp Made for Me, which launched this past June and it was in its first summer for kids from California, is now fully a thing. And the lead sponsor of it is State Bags, financially and many other ways. So that has kind of become like our signature thing right now. We're obviously going to keep doing other things. We just did that bag drop I mentioned with that YouTube guy Jesser and Bucket Squad, his brand. And so we're going to keep doing stuff like that. But Camp Made for Me is now like a baby of State Bags. And it's only going to get better and bigger from here. We have a camp reunion next weekend in Oakland for the whole camp, and we're going to have a Thanksgiving dinner in November in Oakland, and we're just going to keep the family and community tight throughout the year, and state is going to have a huge part in that. And so for me, it's like our roots always have been camp, and now we have our own, and it's, our name is on the t-shirt. And like, for me, that's really a prideful thing. Cause like, I always wanted, when we moved out here, I always wanted to start a camp for kids on the West Coast. And now we have a year under our belt, and it was incredibly successful. There's so much buzz in the community. Like, everybody's like, I'm coming back to camp. I'm getting all my friends to come back to camp. And I'm like, mission accomplished. So we're going to keep building that. And, things come up. So who knows? We might end up doing a huge initiative in the next couple months or whatever. But as of now, we're focused on kind of building Camp Made for Me and making it better every year.
That's awesome. Cool. All right. Well, we are going to link to your Instagram. We will link to the State Bags website. And for everybody listening, I think I personally learned a lot in this episode for sure. And, entrepreneurs out there, I think Scott dropped some serious nuggets of wisdom here. If you're looking for a way to give back, focus on what moves you and start small, and it'll grow from there. So, Scott, thank you, man. Really appreciate you coming into the Lion's Den.
Cool. Thanks for having me, man. This was fun.